Hi guys, and welcome to my June wrap up. I read 12 books, a few of them while I was traveling, a few of them while I was sick. 3 of them were in a trilogy. The first book I read in June was Finale. This was the 3rd book in the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. I enjoyed it. I would say that I wasn't sure what to go into it expecting, because I really liked Caraval and I really liked Legendary, but they both were plot driven. Caraval was like these 2 girls wanting to go to Caraval and one of them following her sister there, and the first story is about Scarlett and Julian Julian's the boy that piques her interest. Doesn't really know where he sets at in the story. And then the second one is about Legendary, which is Legend, who runs Caraval, and then her sister Tella. It's more of Tella's story, what happened to Tella during the first Caraval. But they also kind of go through another Caraval together and her trying to find Legend. So the final one, you don't really know what's going on. You know that there's fates out, but you don't really have a strict driven plot. So it took me a little bit longer to get through Legendary. I think I picked it up earlier and then I ended up listening to it to get through it, but I didn't like listening to it as much as I enjoyed reading the first 2. So I don't know if I'd recommend listening. I enjoyed reading them better. And so I went back to reading this one, which I think kind of saved this one for me. Yeah, so this one has Legend and Tella and Scarlett and Julian. And Scarlett and Julian, you don't know whether she's gonna like the Count, because she goes off and meets the Count, the actual real account, and you don't know whether she's gonna have romantic feelings for him. But Scarlett's just not a set in stone like Tella, where Tella is definitely Legend all the time. Or what is his other name? Devin? I don't remember his other name, but yeah, definitely Legend all the time. I thought the book also would be split between the 2 sisters, because that's the way it read on the Tella's story for the most part of it. There are little things that happen with the Fates, so they do meet the Fates and meet some of them that are bad and are trying to figure out how to destroy the Fates by not destroying all the power that Legend has accumulated. And yeah, so that's where the story goes. That's why it's so big and long. They do meet their mother finally at last, but that part of the story, I wish it would have played out a little bit longer, a little more. But it was just as mysterious as her first 2, and you kind of don't know where it's going. Where her first 2, you kind of didn't know what Caraval was all about, or where it was going, or where it was headed. And same with Legendary. I will say out of the 3, Legendary was my favorite. It was my favorite out of that trilogy, but I recommend them all. They're fun, fun little YA fantasy books. The next one I read, I'm gonna stick them all together, is 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. Let me find the other ones. 1,000 Skies Above You and A Million Worlds with You by Claudia Gray. So I read this trilogy solely based on recommendation from a friend who really enjoyed them and really loved them. They all 3 are about a girl who name is Marguerite and a guy named Paul, but it's all based from Marguerite's perspective, and it is about a girl who travels through dimensions, and she gets to travel through dimensions because her parents are these amazing physicists who come up with a device that they can travel through dimensions. So dimensions are where you made one decision in your life and a new dimension was created. You made another decision in your life and a new dimension was created. But she goes to some that are pretty far and pretty exotic, where they only live on the ocean, or where Russia czars still reign, and she gets to be a princess for a while. So she gets to go on all these little adventures, and in the mix of that, she realizes her love for Paul. There is another boy in this scenario, Theo. In the very beginning book, it's they're trying to figure out who killed her father. If Paul had killed her father, she wants to kill Paul. And then as the book goes on, it's just more of the complications of the dimensions, and people that are trying, who are in other dimensions where they've created the device, who want to rule the other dimensions or want to destroy the other dimensions. And so that's what this whole trilogy is about, is those people who are trying to destroy it or ruin it, and why her father was killed or not killed in the very beginning of the story. And that's what it takes you through, and it takes you through a bit of a love triangle between Theo, Paul, and Marguerite, because there are dimensions where Theo and Marguerite are together. I do enjoy Theo's character a lot. Paul is a very reserved, kind of more boring character, I thought. But I did like him in a way for Marguerite. And then also it comes back to her going into these other dimensions and going into these other women's bodies, and it comes back to being like, whoa, I messed with somebody else's life. Like, they are legitimately a distinctly different person than me, and I messed their life. So that kind of stuff all comes back on her as well. And so yeah, I thought that stuff was all well thought out, and everything was pretty well thought out and it's fun. The only thing I would have to say is you get used to a world and you get used to these new characters, and then she like tears you out of that world, and it's like, wow. Why'd you spend so much time? Like, that part of it was a bit jarring to me. And that's probably why overall it wasn't my favorite of all reads, just because when you're obsessed with a character, you want to get to know them more and more and more. And then instead, you're constantly bombarded with new characters and these people with new different feelings. Even though they're the same names and the same people, and they're living completely different lives, it's different every time. So, yeah, that's sort of where those ones sat. I think I gave them 4 to 3 stars across the board, and I don't want to give away too much. It is a fun little trilogy if you're into physics and dimensions and space and time and everything. It's fun. It doesn't devolve too much into that at all. It is still definitely YA, easy to read, romance, all the good stuff. The next book I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. And this one I thoroughly enjoyed. I really liked. It was recommended as travel reads. That's how I read it when I went to New York City. And you can check out like what I read in New York City vlog, and I talk about it as well there. But The Unhoneymooners is about 2 people who get sent on a honeymoon who weren't supposed to be going on a honeymoon, and it is about Olive and Ethan. Olive and Ethan are the 2 characters. And a lot kind of unpacks in the story. So Olive's sister is considered really lucky, and she's won the sweepstakes, and the trip is non-transferable, yada yada. Try to go through everything to transfer it to let her sister go. But her sister is really, really sick from some food that she also won from another sweepstakes for her wedding. So her sister and her bride and her husband are all really sick, and everybody's really sick except for Olive and Ethan. Olive and Ethan do not get along, which it unreveals throughout the story of like why that happened and why they don't get along and all that once they're like kind of on the honeymoon. But to me, it's like a little bit of shaky ground, like a little bit of suspended belief that somebody was just like not get to know some reasons why some things happened for 4 years or why they're kept apart. There is a big family issues in this story where the sister may have married a brother who was not really that great of a person or really loyal by any means to her. And then the brother obviously taking a brother's side, Ethan taking his brother's side, and then Olive also taking her twin sister's side through the story. There's also another big storyline where Olive doesn't know where she's at in life because she had this really incredible career, and then she got let go, and she's trying to find a job, and she finally just found a job, but it had been a long time, and she just kind of takes this job that she knows she'll be good at, but is that really what she wants to do / go in life? So there's all these other complications going on. But anyways, they get sent on the honeymoon, and it is quick, and it is the beginning, like for them to get onto the honeymoon is really quick and quirky, and it's funny. And they don't get along, and they think they're going to be like going to spas or surfing by themselves. They end up with each other a lot because one, her boss shows up on the scene at this resort, and it is her brand new boss that she's going to start a job with, and then his ex shows up on the scene, and everybody at the resort thinks they're married because this was a trip for a honeymoon, and so they're pretending to be married, so they end up spending all this time together that they didn't think they'd be spending together. They find out about their backstories, about their past, all the troubles they're going through, the troubles that are waiting for them once they get home, and then the at-home thing is really more of a quick wrap-up, just like the beginning was. But I've basically told you the whole plot of the story. I wasn't trying to give away too much because it is a new release. It is fun. It is light-hearted contemporary romance that's supposed to be funny, but there are some deeper complications going on in the story. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a really high rating because it was really, really good to read during travel. The next book I read was Roomies. I also read this while I was in New York City, and I don't think this would have got as high of a score from me if I hadn't been reading while I was in New York. Roomies is also by Christina and Lauren, the authors, and I really enjoyed this one as well. Roomies is about people who get thrown together in a green card marriage. So the girl is struggling through life and wants to be a writer but doesn't know what to write about and doesn't know where she's going. And she's living off her uncles who have taken her in like kind of as parental people her whole life. because her parents have a lot of other kids, and so she's just leaned on her uncles and naturally gone with her uncles. So they pay for her apartment. They give her her job in New York City, where she just takes pictures at a Broadway play. It's basically a fake job because somebody else does the job as well, I'm pretty sure, in the book. And then she stumbles across a guy and then kind of builds up a crush on him. And then her uncle gets in a scenario where he needs a musician. She's like, oh my gosh, you're the perfect guy. It's this guy I sometimes stop by and see, and he's a busker. I don't know how to say that in the New York City subway, but he's a talented, he's amazing, and he'd be perfect for the show. And then comes on the guy, and it turns out he's an illegal immigrant because he came here on a student visa, didn't get his visa renewed, didn't go on to anything after Juilliard, didn't get a job, didn't get a work visa, yada yada. He's been here for 4 years without a visa, and they're like, there's no way you can put him in the show. So she goes out and marries him, unbeknownst to her uncles, because she thinks she owes him a lot, which he kind of does. And she ends up in a green card marriage. So the stuff from the past, the crush and all that stuff comes out in the story, and it's really cute, and it's lighthearted, and it's funny again, and but still with some other bigger issues going on, like Christine and Lauren kind of often do in their books. But it was a perfect setting for me because I was in New York City. I was in the area she kind of lived in, staying, and I went to Broadway shows. So it was kind of a perfect book to read because I had a bit of a downtime when my husband was working, and then when we were in New Jersey, and then also at nights and when I was getting ready, I listened to it. So it was perfect for while I was there. But Holland and Colin, I think Colin is Irish. So that a little bit more intriguing to the book as well. Those two characters, and it's quite a fun book, and I gave it really high ratings as well. Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors by I have to read this name every time, Sanal Dev. I really enjoyed this book as well. I read this traveling as well. I think I was just in a really good mood when I was traveling, but no, for real, I am really big into retellings. I think, no, this is my stack of Pride and Prejudice retellings, and I've read a lot more, and I don't always like them. Like this one, Eligible, I didn't really particularly like that one. So I get rid of them a lot, but I'm obsessed with Pride and Prejudice retellings. I love them. They're fun, and they're interesting, just other people's takes. But more than anybody, I feel like this author kind of got it spot on. There was some little problems in her book, I thought, but for the most part, I think she got it spot on. She did a gender flip, so Darcy is still Darcy, I believe, in the book. His name is DJ, and he's a famous chef, and he has a sister. So he's set up like the original Darcy. And then Elizabeth is Dr. Raj, and she's a neurosurgeon, and she's kind of proud of what she's done and what she's accomplished in life, and neurosurgery is her life, and that's all her life is. And she meets the celebrity chef because his sister needs a surgery she doesn't want. His sister is going to lose her eyesight, and she's an artist, and she thinks she can't go on being an artist and go on with her life if she has this brain surgery, but it's either that or she's going to die. And then then the chef also is working for her family, and her family is very wealthy and controls a lot of big events going on in the town, and that's where he's going to make his money to pay for his sister and all the money he has spent on his sister already. So there's a bit of complications there. The only thing is like medically, I don't think it's right to get involved with your patient's family, but you gotta just go over that. Just go over that. If you're in the medical field, maybe you can't get over it, but I think you just gotta go over that in that book. But why I say it was gender flip is because Darcy ends up acting a lot like Elizabeth, and he's the one with all the insecurities, and she's actually the proud, prideful one, and says like all the wrong things at all the wrong times that are cringeworthy, and she didn't really mean them because she was like tired and getting off shifts, and yeah, she didn't really mean them as like being mean or anything, but it turned out to be done so well and so cute. And I think this author really still got the satire, and she developed into the other characters but not too much into the other characters, and kept the main focus more on Darcy and Elizabeth's kind of story. I really liked it. I thought it was fun. And I liked that you got to know the characters a little bit more, some of the outside characters, once again, a little bit more than you do in Jane Austen's. But yeah, it was one of the best retellings, if not the best retelling I've ever read. So if you're a Pride and Prejudice fan, if you're looking for a retelling, definitely check this one out. Beautiful cover, a fun story filled with food that makes you hungry. which is always great in July. The next book I read was One Day in December by Josie Silver. This tells a story about Lori and Jack, and I have read 2 different one-day books. So I read the book One Day by Nicholas, I don't remember who it was by, and another book that was on a similar path as this. So I didn't like either one of those, and so I was kind of hesitant, but people kept recommending this. I think it was on Reese Witherspoon's list or something, One Day in December. So I checked it out, and I turned out to like this one. This was one of the best scenario ones I could have read because it was more realistic, where the other ones were a little bit cringeworthy, like you guys could get it together, or like there wasn't a reason for them to be apart. I don't really know, but this one, it made a lot more sense. So this starts out with a girl named Lauren and Lori and Jack. So Lori sees Jack, and it's like insta love. She doesn't believe in insta love, but she sees him, and it's just like this moment of like, and they just both freeze. Neither one of them gets on the train. She's like leaving on the train, and Jack has that same moment. And then she doesn't see him again for 1 year. So that's the whole premise, 1 year, 1 day a year over the next 10 years, like these books are. And the next time she sees him, her best friend has been talking about this boy, and she's like, I can marry him. He's wonderful. He has all these great attributes. He's the best, blah, blah, blah. I can't wait for you to meet him. And then she shows up like a year later, and this is her best friend she lives with, and it's him. And she can't say anything because her best friend thinks she's going to marry this guy. And she's been looking for this guy for a year, and her best friend knows all about it, but she doesn't know that it's him. And she finally gets to meet the guy and know the guy, and his name is Jack, and he is wonderful. So she suffers in silence while her best friend dates him for a long time. And to Jack's side of the story, he recognizes that it's her, but he also freezes up, and he's like, I'm in this really great relationship. So for me, this one was a lot more believable. I could see meeting somebody like, oh, there's something there, and then you're dating somebody else, and you're caught up in that, and so you just kind of push that aside. So this one to me is so much more believable. And then, their life goes on, and Jack ends up not with her best friend eventually, a really long time in the book, but he's a really great guy. He's become one of their best friends. Her friend dates other people, and they both end up dating other people. The other thing I really liked about this book is she goes off and meets this man who's like wonderful, and she focuses her life on that. She doesn't focus her life on what if something ever happened with me and Jack, or going back to the Jack scenario, which I kind of hate. Like in the Light We Lost, that's what bugged me a lot, because she wasn't focusing enough on her husband. It just like, you gotta move on at some point. And I feel like Lori in this story definitely focuses and gives like all her love, and figures out for her love to figure out with this new man who she ends up marrying and married to, and she tries everything to make it work. But it turns out with that particular love story, she just can't. They met on like a vacation scenario, and they just never transitioned right into the real world, and didn't really like each other in the real world, I guess. So yeah, it is a really long book, One Day in December. It's really cute. You can read it any time of year. You don't have to read it December. It doesn't give me super Christmas vibes or anything. Sometimes when their one day would happen, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize it was Christmassy. But yeah, it's a really cute novel. You can definitely read it in July, and I definitely suggest checking out. And it's far more realistic than I think some of those novels are, where they're like the long lost love that you maybe shoulda, coulda, woulda have maybe someday. Read for the summer readathon, so you can go check out that video below. It was so much fun. It's the start of June 21st. The summerthon is fun. So I read a few books that I probably wouldn't have read in June. They weren't on my TBR. Actually, all 3 of them I read were not on my TBR for June, but I'm excited I read them. They were all fun. So the next book I read was Crazy Rich Asians. Most way through this book, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to keep it. I liked the movie and all, but I don't know if I'm going to keep the book, because I know everybody rants and raves about it, but I thought there were too many subplots and POV changes and stuff. But what got me was the ending of the book. It really wrapped it up all nicely. So Crazy Rich Asians, as we all know, is now a major motion picture. But it's about a girl who gets thrust into this lifestyle of Nicholas Young, and she didn't know he was really wealthy. And there's all this stuff about mainland China versus the Chinese who moved off mainland and who live in Singapore. And people, American Chinese versus wealthy people versus non-wealthy versus old money versus new money versus just every kind of little nitty-gritty, icky part of society, which I hear is like a big thing over there, so I'm glad it represents the culture a lot. But yeah, and just this exorbitant amount of wealth thrown around in this book. But it was a fun read. It's a fun love story. That's the main essential, is the love story and how you get through this, and how a girl who is American Chinese, who's an economist and has her own passions and her own dreams and her own professorship in life, how she could possibly fit in with this man whose family wants the world for him. And so, yeah, Rachel Chu and Nicholas Young, last names are very important in this book. They say last names a lot in this book. But yeah, what really, and the ending, why I ended up really liking the book was the ending, and also violent and melodramatic. But Astrid's the main book person in the book, and actually in the end, I was more intrigued about Astrid's relationship than their relationship. And so Astrid also kept me going. So one of the subplots in the end actually kept me going. I will be reading the next one. It was fun. The next one's China Rich Girlfriends, it looks like. But yeah, I'm glad I picked this up. I picked it up because of Summer Readathon, and I'm so glad I did, because it's set in the summer. It's a beach read because it's a chick lit fast read. I did read a little bit slower than most chick licks. It wasn't a hook, line, and sinker. The author, the words like didn't capture me that much, but I still really did enjoy it overall in the end. The next book I read was Sunrise Walks and Coffee Talks by Rosanna Maxwell. This was such a cute story. It was a short story. It was done really well. And I did this for Summerthon because of the sunset and the tea on the cover. But this tells a story of a young boy. It's a short story about a boy who has leukemia, and he runs into this old man who has like lost all of his hope in life. He was a professor and has been kind of booted out of his professorship because he's old, and because they want to go a different way, and the professor is really lost in life and has no hope. And this young man, who shouldn't have any hope for his life at this point because he's stage 4, this young boy has all the hope in the world and is super curious about the world and super happy, and he kind of pulls the professor out, and then they both go on a bit of a journey together, helping other little boys who are sick. But it's just so fun and so easy to read, and it's a short story, and it reminds me a lot actually of Frederick Boxman's like My Grandpa. He's got like a short story about my grandpa, because that's where he started writing, was when he was talking to his grandpa, I think. But it reminds me of that kind of short story, so I really, really loved it. So happy I read it. It was so good. Such an easy, light read for summer. Just because it was a short story, not that the topics were hard, but it was also just uplifting and happy and makes you want to be hopeful. The next one I read was The Last Summer of You and Me by Anne Brashers. This tells the story of two girls and a little bit of a romance about a guy named Paul. So these two sisters grew up in the summers on this little secluded beach island, and they had so much fun with Paul, and Paul gets brought into their family because his parents aren't around, and he's in this big empty house across the street from them. But it's just this bubble they've created over summer, where every summer they just kind of go back to who they were as kids almost, and what they really love to do in life. And her sister's really adventurous and outdoorsy and wants to do all the exotic sports, and is a lifeguard every summer, where she's not. She's much more of a recluse, a different kind of sort of person. And then there's Paul, who is their neighborhood friend, and he's never crossed those barriers of like, I like these girls or anything like that, because they've just kind of kept it very childhood, and they just love going back to this place. So this is the final summer they have there, and everything that goes down in it, and like it really pulls them out and brings them all into the real world. They're all in like their young 20s, mid 20s at this point in the book. So it's really quite about time that they got out of this bubble. Some parts are really sad, but it's so good. Anne Brashers is a wonderful writer. I read this in a day because she is so gripping. And just, oh, she's amazing. If you love The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and you haven't read this one, you'll absolutely love it. Like, you'll love it. It's just so good. And she's just such a good writer. Whether you like the characters or like the storyline or anything, she's just a really good writer, and she'll make you like it. So yeah, the last book I read, because I read the trilogy, I don't own the book. I own the second book, which is exciting because I can move on to the second one. The second one is The Dazzling Heights, but the first one is The 1000th Floor by Katharine McGee. And I really enjoyed this one, probably because I had been promised before books. I loved the Gossip Girl series. I had been promised before books would be Gossip Girl-ish or Pretty Little Liars-ish. So I read Pretty Little Liars, and I had read other things by Sarah Shepard, and I liked them, but I hated Pretty Little Liars. But I read them all the way through to find out who it was, but I just didn't like them. And I had been promised other books would be like really great, like Gossip Girl or something like that, and they just weren't. But this one just, it nailed it spot on. Whether I really enjoyed the book or not, it was just like what I had been looking for in so many other books that I was really happy about it. But because it's just like Gossip Girl or Pretty Little Liars, the plot is like instantly there. There's all these characters, I've got all these things going on and all these secrets. So when you first enter the scene, there's a girl named Lita, and Lita has addiction problems that she's hiding from all her friends. And also she's hiding from her best friend that she slept with her best friend's brother. And then her best friend, Avery, was this like perfectly genetically made person. And so Lita and Avery are both really wealthy, live at the top of this building, and New York City basically has been concluded, like, deduced down to one building, but it's a huge building and covers blocks and blocks and blocks. And if you live at the very, very, very top on the 1,000th floor, you got a lot of money. And so, yeah, if you live a little below like the 500th floor, you don't have any money, basically. This is what my understanding was. So Lita and Avery are both really wealthy. Avery is genetically engineered to be like the perfect pretty girl. Yet she has a big secret that she's had her whole life, that she's always had a crush on her brother, who was adopted, who her best friend slept with, which she has kept a secret for a year. Her brother has disappeared and they don't really know where he is. He's taking a gap year and he is coming back on the scene. So a little bit of intrigue coming back there. Eris is this really cute, bubbly, happy person, easygoing. She's also super wealthy. But what happens to her in the very, very beginning is that her DNA doesn't match her father, and all of a sudden she becomes really, really poor. So she meets this slew of other characters as well. And then these other two characters are brought onto the scene as well right away. One of them is named Rylan, and she goes to work a party of a guy named Watt. And Watt is a really rich guy who doesn't have his parents in his life anymore, and because he's lost them. And she has lost her mom, and she goes and works a party for him and is a maid for him for a little bit. And then the other one is well, I guess it's not Watt, because Watt's the other guy. Watt is another guy who's poor. I think he lives on the 200th floor or something like that. But he's like a tech genius, and he's done some illegal stuff as well with tech, and he gets hired out by these wealthy kids, and he gets pulled into this, and he goes on a date with Avery at one point. So in the very beginning, this is like all set in the setting scene. I'm not giving anything away. So you know there's a lot of drama that's about to happen. And then the very first scene, a girl dies. So it's the foreshadow at the end of the book. So you know somebody's going to die, and you don't know who it is, but you do know it's a girl, and you know she's pushed off a building. So, yeah, that's where the setting scene starts. There's all this intrigue and stuff, and it does play out. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot of secrets. It ends on a huge secret. It ends on the death. You don't know what's going to happen, and there's all these secrets that tie them together. So definitely reminds me of Pretty Little Liars. Definitely reminds me of Gossip Girl. I'm pretty sure I'm going on with the series. I was just so happy that it was like what it was promised to be, because I had read a lot of books before that were promised to be like those, but this one kind of hit the nail on the head there. And yeah, those are all the books I read in June. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next one. See you guys next time. Bye!